As I quietly eavesdropped on my stepmom and stepsister scheming to exclude me from my dad's inheritance, I realized I had to make a move. It's been a tough year since I struck out on my own, but now my dad understands the full story, and things have taken a new turn. I'm a 23-year-old guy who's been living with my dad, stepmom, and stepsister for half a decade. After losing my mom when I was 16, my dad remarried quickly, introducing me to my new stepmom, Linda, and stepsister, Emily, who's a couple of years my junior. Initially, our home life was decent. Nothing spectacular, but manageable. Linda attempted to fill the motherly role, though it never quite felt genuine. Emily was courteous, yet always seemed a bit removed. I chalked it up to the usual awkwardness that comes with blending families and hoped things would smooth out eventually. Following my mom's death, my dad immersed himself more deeply in his work, a habit that persisted even after he remarried. He's a successful entrepreneur, often away or working late, which meant I spent considerable time alone with Linda and Emily. This setup was okay at first. We managed to enjoy family meals when Dad was around, and everything appeared normal externally. After graduating from a local college, I moved back home while job hunting in my field. That's when I sensed a shift. Linda's demeanor cooled, often hinting that it was time I stood on my own 2 feet. Emily, fresh from college herself, moved back as well, and suddenly the house felt smaller, charged with a subtle tension that I couldn't quite identify. I've been diligently sending out job applications and attending interviews, despite the tough job market. My dad has been supportive, urging me to take my time to find the right job. Linda, however, has grown openly impatient about my continued presence at home. Everything changed last week when I accidentally overheard a shocking plot. Tucked away in my room, I listened as Linda and Emily discussed in the hallway, likely thinking I was out. Their voices carried clearly. Linda was adamant about pushing me out before the will was finalized, and Emily concurred, stressing the risk of me receiving an equal share. The reality hit me hard. They were planning against me, viewing me as a mere obstacle in their path to financial comfort. Frozen in disbelief, I listened as they plotted various tactics to undermine me, from restricting my use of the family car to hinder my job prospects to accidentally breaking my laptop to stop my online applications. Their conversation, though brief, laid bare their intentions to manipulate my father and secure their financial future at my expense. The next few days I walked around in a daze, forced to interact with Linda and Emily, who now seemed to watch me with cold calculation. I contemplated confiding in my dad but hesitated, fearing the impact it might have on his happiness and the potential disbelief I might face. Instead, I started planning my exit. I reached out to friends for any leads on roommates and even applied for jobs I previously would have passed over, desperate to escape the toxic atmosphere at home. Fortune smiled on me when a friend of a friend needed someone to sublet their apartment while studying abroad. Despite the high rent, I seized the opportunity, tapping into my savings to make it work. When I announced my move, my dad expressed surprise but supported my decision. Linda and Emily, on the other hand, barely masked their delight, exchanging sly glances as they helped me pack. On the day I moved out, I caught another snippet of their conversation, further confirming their intent to influence my dad's will now that I was out of the picture. Settling into my modest new place, I embraced the freedom despite the challenges. While the neighborhood isn't ideal, the space is all mine. I've continued job hunting, picking up temporary gigs to get by. My dad checks in occasionally, worried by my rare visits, but I've kept him in the dark about the true reason for my distance, not yet ready to burst his bubble. I've considered legal action to secure my inheritance, but the betrayal stings more than the potential financial loss. Reflecting on my mom's values, I realize that family means love, not just legal ties or blood relations, a standard Linda and Emily clearly don't meet. For now, I'm focusing on carving out a life independent of any familial expectations or inheritances. Just last week, I landed an entry-level job. It doesn't pay much, but it's a start. I've yet to share the news with my dad, wary of Linda and Emily's potential interference. To cope with the lingering resentment and betrayal, I've started therapy, which has been a slow but steadying process. My therapist advised me to write unsent letters to Linda and Emily, a therapeutic outlet that's helped me articulate my frustrations. At night, I often dream of my mom, who appears proud and reassuring. Her absence is deeply felt, especially now. I've considered reconnecting with her side of the family, from whom we drifted apart after her passing. As for confronting Linda and Emily, part of me yearns for closure, while another part wants to simply move on and rebuild, away from the shadow of their schemes. For now, my focus remains steadfast on forging my own path, defined by personal integrity rather than inherited wealth. Reconnecting with my mom's family has been tough, given the pain it dredged up, but now I'm starting to feel a need for that familial bond again. Perhaps it's time to mend those broken ties. Over the months, I've developed a mundane but stable routine. Work, home, repeat. It's nothing thrilling, but it provides a solid foundation as I carve out a new existence for myself, one that's distinctly separate from Linda, Emily, and any disputed inheritance. Dad's birthday is looming next month, and I am torn about attending the family dinner. I long to celebrate with him, yet the thought of facing Linda and Emily acting as if all is well turns my stomach. On weekends, I've taken to volunteering at a local youth center. It's a place where many kids like me have faced loss or come from fractured homes. Assisting them has been a therapeutic way to process my own grief and anger. I often ponder what stories Linda and Emily might be spinning about my abrupt departure. Did they paint me as the wayward stepson who deserted his family? Or do they act as though I never existed? These thoughts occasionally haunt me, though I try to push them aside. At work and through volunteering, I've made new friends, connections that feel more authentic than any I had with Linda or Emily. A recent awkward encounter with Emily at the grocery store left me rattled for days. She was overly friendly, inquiring about my job and new apartment. I kept my responses brief and made a swift exit. This incident has made me question my long-term plans. Do I stay in this city, risking unwanted run-ins, or do I start fresh elsewhere, leaving behind not just them but potentially my dad too? As my lease nears its end, I face a decision: renew or move to a better place. Both options feel daunting. The thought of relocating again is as exhausting as it is to remain in this cramped apartment. Dating has been a mixed bag. It's nice, but I'm wary of opening up, fearing further betrayal. Work is a bright spot, though. A recent promotion has alleviated some of my financial pressures, no longer forcing me to dip into savings for rent. The prospect of discussing what I overheard about Linda and Emily with my dad fills me with dread. What if he doesn't believe me? What if it drives a wedge between us? Losing him would be unbearable. Sometimes, anger towards my mom surfaces irrationally. I blame her for leaving me in this mess. It's a struggle I'm working through, pushing away these thoughts when they arise. I've taken up cooking, a necessary skill now that I'm on my own. There's a gratifying element to preparing meals from scratch, a way of nurturing myself that's both literal and figurative. With the holidays approaching, I'm conflicted about returning home. The facade of festive cheer is less appealing than the loneliness of spending it alone. Sleep has been elusive, with my mind often replaying that fateful conversation I overheard. I analyze past interactions with Linda and Emily, searching for missed signs. It's exhausting, and I find it hard to turn off these thoughts. I've considered confronting them directly, but fear it would only lead to denials and potentially escalate to my dad. Some days are better than others. I manage to go about my routines, while other days the weight of everything feels crushing. Keeping a journal has been therapeutic, helping me process my emotions and serving as a record of this chaotic period. Reflecting on the past 6 months, I realize how much I've changed. I'm learning independence, shaping a life free from the expectations and manipulations of others. The questions about confronting Linda and Emily, telling my dad the truth, and overcoming this betrayal remain open. But for now, I'm taking life one day at a time, building a life that's truly mine. It's been a year since I moved out after overhearing my stepmom and stepsister's scheme. Not all changes have been positive, and I'm sorry for the delay in updating. Life's been overwhelming. Between work, therapy, and just staying afloat, updating hasn't been a priority. But your support on my original post has been a beacon during these tough times. Thank you for your advice and kind words. They've truly helped. Now for the update. I'm still at the same job I secured after moving out. It's okay, but the pay just scrapes by in covering my bills. The job market remains tough, and every rejection feels like a personal blow, a reminder that I'm still struggling to find my footing. My relationship with my dad has grown tense. I've been dodging family gatherings and making up excuses for not visiting. He's noticed, of course. He calls more often, probing if everything's all right. It's tough lying to him, but I can't muster the courage to tell him the real reasons for my departure. On the rare occasions we meet, he looks both worried and tired. I can't help but wonder if it's because of Linda and Emily or just concern for me. I did attend his birthday dinner a few months ago, which was just as uncomfortable as I anticipated. Linda and Emily were all about fake smiles and veiled concern, probably sizing up whether I was struggling enough to relinquish any claim to an inheritance. I made a quick exit using the excuse of an early meeting. The holidays were tough too. I told Dad I had to work on Christmas, but in truth, I spent the day alone in my apartment, microwaving a turkey dinner and watching old movies. It was bleak, yet still preferable to a pretense of familial harmony with Linda and Emily. Lately, I've been toying more seriously with the idea of telling Dad everything. Yet, every time I lean towards honesty, fear holds me back. What if he doesn't believe me? Or worse, what if he believes me but chooses Linda over me? I'm not sure I could handle that rejection. My therapy sessions are beneficial, though progress feels painfully slow. My therapist assures me that healing takes time, but there are days I doubt I'll ever move past this anger and betrayal. Run-ins with Emily around town have been unnerving. She acts as if everything is normal, as if we're still one big happy family, which just makes my skin crawl. I've started avoiding certain places just to lessen the chance of encountering her or Linda. However, volunteering at the youth center continues to be a source of light. I've bonded with a teenager named Ryan who lost his mom last year. Helping him with his grief has unexpectedly helped me as well. Dating has been a struggle. I find it hard to open up, always bracing for disappointment. My last date ended abruptly when she remarked that I carried too much baggage. She might be right. With my lease up next month, I'm torn about moving. The idea of packing up is daunting, yet the thought of staying put with its noisy neighbors and unreliable heating is equally unappealing. I've considered relocating to another part of town or even a nearby city for a fresh start. Reaching out to my Aunt Karen, my mom's sister, was awkward at first but felt like reclaiming a part of me I thought was lost. She's invited me over for a weekend, though the thought of explaining everything that's happened is intimidating. Work has been stressful with layoff rumors swirling, and being one of the newer employees, I fear I might be let go. The idea of joblessness is terrifying, not least because my savings are nearly depleted. My health has declined from all the stress, I've lost weight and my blood pressure is up. My doctor has advised finding ways to relax, easier said than done. I've contemplated a drastic move to a new city, escaping the possibility of running into Linda or Emily, but the thought of leaving Dad is too painful to seriously consider. Yet, amidst the darkness, there have been glimmers of light, new friends from work and volunteering who appreciate me for who I am, not for any potential inheritance. I've taken up guitar and started running. Both hobbies help distract me from my troubles. As the one-year mark of my move approaches, anxiety about my progress mounts. My therapist reminds me not to be too hard on myself, that healing isn't a straight path. My visit to Aunt Karen's was a brief respite, a chance to connect with relatives who knew and loved my mom, sharing stories I'd never heard. For a weekend, I felt a sense of belonging that has long eluded me. Returning to my empty apartment after visiting Aunt Karen was more difficult than I expected. The visit brought up complex emotions. Aunt Karen inquired about Dad and his new wife, and I found myself choking up, unable to articulate my thoughts. She noticed my discomfort and gently pressed for more information, leading me to spill everything. Aunt Karen was outraged on my behalf and wanted to confront Linda and Emily herself. I had to calm her down and explain why I hadn't told Dad yet. She didn't agree with my decision but respected it. Before I left, she made me promise to stay in touch and offered her support, which was comforting. Things with Dad reached a breaking point last week when he showed up at my apartment unannounced, clearly distressed by our growing distance. Unable to deflect his concerns anymore, I ended up pouring out everything. The overheard conversation, my fears about the inheritance, and my avoidance of family gatherings. It was an emotional release I couldn't hold back. Dad listened intently, his expression turning graver with each revelation. Although he didn't explicitly say he believed me, he didn't dismiss my concerns either. He promised to be more observant of Linda and Emily's behavior, and even mentioned talking to his lawyer about securing my inheritance regardless of his marriage's outcome. The relief I felt after our conversation was immense, yet I couldn't shake off a sense of guilt for potentially upending his life and his marriage. Dad reassured me that I did the right thing, that he needed to know the truth, but I could see the turmoil in his eyes. It's been a week since our talk, and communication has been minimal. He texted once to say he was looking into things and would be in touch. The silence is hard to ignore, and I'm trying not to overthink it. Linda called me yesterday, her tone unnaturally sweet, inviting me to Sunday dinner. I declined, citing work commitments. I suspect she knows about my conversation with Dad and is attempting some form of damage control, which makes me uneasy. As I approach the start of my second year on my own, I'm at a crossroads. Stay near Dad, but also close to Linda and Emily, move closer to my mom's family with Aunt Karen, or start anew in a different city. I haven't decided yet, but for the first time in a while, I feel like I have real choices. The future is uncertain, yet not as bleak as it seemed a year ago. I'm not fully okay, but I'm getting there, focusing on my job, volunteering, and new hobbies. I'm striving to build a life that's truly mine, independent of anyone else's intentions or inheritance. It's challenging and not the life I envisioned, but it's mine, and perhaps that's enough. The conversation with Dad has resurrected old feelings and memories of Mom. I find myself wondering what she would think of all this. Would she be proud of my independence, or disappointed that I didn't fight harder? These uncertainties gnaw at me, and I've been having trouble sleeping again. Every phone ring sets me on edge, hoping it's Dad with news. Update 2. Emily tried to friend me on social media last week. I ignored the request, unsettled by her motives. Whether it's surveillance or a pretense of familial bliss, I want no part in it. I've been pondering the future a lot, questioning whether I'll ever view it with hope rather than anxiety. My lease is up next week, and I've decided to move. Not far, just to a better apartment in a different part of town. It's a modest step, but it symbolizes moving forward rather than remaining stagnant. Having dinner with Ryan from the youth center, who is off to college soon, reminded me that progress is possible. His gratitude for my support this past year, and seeing him overcome his grief, has given me a spark of hope. As I pack up my apartment, I take stock of my life, a job, an apartment, friends. It's not much, but it's a foundation I've built on my own, a mix of pride and ongoing pain. I'm still waiting to hear back from Dad about his findings. The silence is tough, but I'm holding on, ready to face whatever comes next. I'm stronger now, seasoned by betrayal, loneliness, and uncertainty. For now, I'm focused on my move, on making my new place feel like home, and on continuing to forge a life that is unequivocally mine, regardless of what unfolds with Dad, Linda, and Emily. It's not the life I planned, but it's the one I'm living, and for today, that's sufficient. Final update. It's been about 3 months since my last post, and so much has happened. I'm not sure where to start, but I'll begin with the most significant news. After our heart-to-heart, Dad spent weeks investigating. He hired a private investigator, reviewed financial records, and even orchestrated a sting operation, details of which he's kept from me. Ultimately, he gathered enough evidence to confirm everything I'd told him. Returning to my empty apartment after visiting Aunt Karen was more challenging than I had anticipated. The visit stirred up a whirlwind of emotions, especially when Aunt Karen asked about Dad and his new wife. I struggled to find the words and ended up spilling everything to her. Aunt Karen was livid on my behalf and wanted to call Dad immediately to confront Linda and Emily. I had to calm her down and explain my reasons for keeping quiet. She didn't agree but respected my decision. Before I left, she made me promise to keep in touch and offered her support. Knowing I had someone from my mom's side of the family in my corner was a huge comfort. Everything came to a head last week when Dad showed up at my apartment unannounced. He was visibly worried and said he couldn't stand the distance between us anymore. He needed to know what was going on. I tried to brush it off, but he wouldn't let it go. Eventually, I told him everything. I explained overhearing Linda and Emily's conversation, my fears about the inheritance, and why I had been avoiding family gatherings. It all came out in a rush of emotions I could no longer contain. Dad listened silently, his expression growing more serious with each word. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time before apologizing. He said he had no idea any of this was happening, and that he had been blind to what was going on in his own home. He didn't outright say he believed me, but he promised to look into it and to pay closer attention to Linda and Emily's behavior. He also said he'd talk to his lawyer about protecting my inheritance, no matter what happened with his marriage. After our talk, I felt a mix of relief and guilt. I was glad to have finally told Dad, but I felt bad for potentially disrupting his life and marriage. Dad reassured me that I did the right thing, that he needed to know the truth, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. Since our conversation, communication has been sparse. Dad texted to say he was looking into things and would be in touch soon. The silence is hard to bear, but I'm trying not to read too much into it. Linda called me yesterday, her voice dripping with sweetness, inviting me to Sunday dinner. I declined, using work as an excuse. I suspect she knows about my conversation with Dad and is trying to do damage control, which makes me uneasy. As I approach the start of my second year on my own, I'm at a crossroads. Do I stay here close to Dad but also to Linda and Emily? Do I move closer to my mom's family with Aunt Karen? Or do I start anew in a different city? I haven't decided yet, but for the first time in a long while I feel like I have real choices. The future is uncertain, but not as bleak as it seemed a year ago. I'm not completely okay, but I'm getting there. I'm focusing on my job, my volunteering, and my new hobbies. I'm working on building a life that's truly mine, independent of anyone else's expectations or inheritance. It's challenging and not the life I envisioned, but it's mine, and perhaps that's enough for now. Talking to Dad has brought up many memories of Mom. I find myself wondering what she would think of all this. Would she be proud of me for standing on my own, or disappointed that I didn't fight harder? These thoughts keep me up at night, and I've been having trouble sleeping again. Every time my phone rings, I jump, hoping it's Dad with news. Update 2. Emily tried to friend me on social media last week. I ignored the request, feeling unsettled by her motives. Is she trying to keep tabs on me, or is it another attempt to maintain a facade of family harmony? Either way, I want no part of it. I've been thinking a lot about my future, which once felt full of promise and now seems so uncertain. The idea of going back to school for a master's degree crosses my mind, but I feel stuck in survival mode, just trying to keep my head above water. My lease is up next week, and after much deliberation, I've decided to move to a slightly better apartment in a different part of town. It's a small step but feels significant, a decision to move forward rather than stay stuck. I had dinner with Ryan from the youth center last night. He's heading off to college soon and wanted to thank me for all the support I've given him over the past year. Seeing his progress gives me hope that I can move forward too. As I pack up my apartment, I reflect on the past year. I left my family home with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart, and now I have a job, an apartment, and friends. It's not much, but it's something I've built for myself. There's a sense of pride in that, mixed with lingering pain and uncertainty. I'm still waiting to hear from Dad about what he's found out. The silence is tough, but I'm trying to be patient. No matter what happens, I know I'll face it. I'm stronger now than I was a year ago. I've survived betrayal, loneliness, and uncertainty. I can survive whatever comes next. For now, I'm focusing on my move, on setting up my new apartment, on making it feel like home. I'm continuing to build a life that's mine regardless of what happens with Dad, Linda, and Emily. It's not the life I thought I'd have, but it's the one I'm living, and for today, that has to be enough. Final update. It's been about 3 months since my last post, and a lot has happened. I'm not sure where to start, but here's the biggest news. After our heart-to-heart, Dad spent weeks investigating. He hired a private investigator, reviewed financial records, and even set up some kind of sting operation. In the end, he uncovered enough evidence to confirm everything I'd told him. Linda and Emily had been siphoning money from Dad's accounts for years. They made small withdrawals that went unnoticed but accumulated to a significant amount. They also used emotional manipulation to pressure Dad into changing his will. When confronted with the evidence, Linda initially denied everything and then tried to blame Emily. Emily broke down and confessed, throwing Linda under the bus. It was a chaotic scene. Dad has filed for divorce and is pressing charges for financial fraud. Linda and Emily have moved out and are staying with Linda's sister in another state. I feel a mix of vindication and sorrow. While it's affirming to know my fears were valid, seeing Dad go through this pain is hard. He thought he loved Linda, and discovering the truth has been devastating. Dad and I are talking more now. He's apologized numerous times for not seeing the signs and for not believing me sooner. I've forgiven him, but there's still a strain in our relationship. We're working on it, though, and we've started having weekly dinners together, just the two of us. It's awkward at times, but it's a step in the right direction. I'm still in my new apartment, and the move has been beneficial. It feels like a fresh start, a place that's truly mine without any ties to Linda or Emily. I've been gradually furnishing it, making it feel like home. It's not much, but it's mine, and that means a lot. Work is going better. The layoffs I feared didn't happen, and I got a small raise. It's enough that I'm not living paycheck to paycheck anymore, and I've started saving a little each month. Therapy continues to help. My therapist says I'm making progress, even if it doesn't always feel that way. The anger and betrayal are still there, but they're not as overwhelming as before. I'm learning to live with what happened, not letting it define me. I've been spending more time with my mom's side of the family, and Aunt Karen has been a constant source of support. She's become like a surrogate mother, always ready with advice or a listening ear. I've been visiting her family more often and reconnecting with my cousins. It's nice to feel like I have a family again, even if it's different from the one I grew up with. Dating remains a challenge. I've been on a few dates, but nothing serious. I'm still working on trusting people and opening up. My therapist says this is normal and will take time. I'm trying to be patient with myself. Writing has become a new outlet for me. It started as journaling but has evolved into something more. I'm considering turning my experiences into a book, maybe a memoir or a fictionalized account. Writing has been a way to process everything that's happened. Dad and I had another long talk about the inheritance. He set up a trust for me, separate from his personal assets, to ensure I'm taken care of no matter what. I told him it wasn't necessary, that I don't care about the money, but he insisted. I think it's his way of making amends. Dad is also considering selling the house. There are too many bad memories associated with it. Part of me is sad because it was my childhood home, but I understand his need for a fresh start. We've been looking at smaller places together, and he jokes about becoming roommates, though we both know we need our own spaces. I ran into one of Emily's friends at the grocery store last week. She glared at me and muttered something about me ruining Emily's life. I wanted to yell and defend myself, but instead I walked away. Their opinions don't matter anymore. I know the truth, and that's enough. Work has been a welcome distraction. I've thrown myself into my job, taking on extra projects. My boss has noticed, and there's talk of a promotion in the near future. It feels good to be valued and to see my hard work paying off. Dad and I are planning a trip together, just a weekend at a nearby lake. We used to go camping there before Mom got sick. It feels like a step towards rebuilding our relationship and creating new memories. I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately, wondering what she would think of everything that's happened. I miss her more than ever. Aunt Karen gave me a box of Mom's old things, photos, letters, and some of her jewelry. Going through it was emotional but also healing. It's nice to have these tangible connections to her. I've started reaching out to old friends, people I lost touch with when everything went down with Linda and Emily. Some have been receptive, others not so much, but it feels good to rebuild my support network. The legal proceedings against Linda and Emily are ongoing. Dad's lawyer keeps us updated, but I try not to focus on it too much. They'll face consequences for their actions, but I don't want their fate to control my life anymore. I'm thinking more about the future, not just surviving day to day, but actually planning ahead. I'm considering going back to school for a master's degree. It's a big step, but for the first time in a long time, I feel ready to take it. There are still bad days, but the good days are starting to outnumber them. I'm not fully okay, but I'm getting there. I'm building a life for myself, one that's not defined by what Linda and Emily tried to do to me. It's not the life I imagined, but it's mine, and for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future. To everyone who's followed my story and offered support and advice, thank you. Your kindness has meant more than you know. This will be my final update. It's time to close this chapter and focus on writing the next one. Wish me luck.